Euzubillahimineşşeytanirracim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Elhamdülillahi Rabbil alemin. Esselatu vesselamu ala Resulina Muhammedin ve ala alihi ve ashabihi ve etbaihi ve sellem. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. We have been studying 23rd word since a couple of weeks. And this is the first chapter we have been studying. So just remember, it was studying the verse, "Indeed, we have created man on the most excellent patterns, and sent him down to the lowest of the low, except those who believe and do good deeds." And in discussion of this, in the first point, the author talked about how belief enlightens man. In the first point. In the second point, he said how belief enlightens the existence for man. In the third point, he talked about how belief is both a light in here referring to the first 2 points, enlightening, and also it's a strength. In there, he talked about reliance on God. On the fourth point, he started making a case for supplication, how man's basic duty is belief and supplication. This was his main, and he was making a point saying that compare the animals and human, you will see that human is meant to learn, or human's perfection is not in terms of acting, but human's perfection is in terms of asking and learning. And fifth point, last week we started discussing this. It was studying as belief necessitates supplication as a certain means of securing needs, and both human nature has an intense desire for it. And Almighty God decrees, "Say, my sustainer would not concern himself with you, but for your supplication," which has the meaning of, what importance would you have if you did not offer me supplications? He also commands, "Call upon me, and I will answer you." So with these, he was making a background saying the importance of supplication for men, and without supplication, man not being an important thing at all. Then came the question, we frequently offer supplications, but they are not accepted. But the verse is general. It states that every supplication is answered. So we have been studying the answer to this question, to which the initial answer was, answering is one thing, accepting is another thing. So in there, he was saying that all supplications are answered. If anybody would like to remind us how every supplication is answered, it might be a nice reminder before we go with the next page. How is every supplication answered? Or whenever I do make a supplication, do I feel like I am being answered? What does that mean?
I don't remember what we said last week, but what I'm thinking about now is, or I guess we did say this last week as well, the purpose of supplication, or when you are making a supplication, it's not so that you can receive this thing at the end. It's not like so he can then grant you something. It's the supplication, the act of making the supplication itself, connecting with the source that is able to fulfill your needs, connecting with your creator, connecting with the one that, you know, gave existence to everything. That is the purpose of it. And once you are able to connect, then it's almost answered just there, right? When you make that supplication, because you are connecting, then the biggest benefit of it, which is being able to have a relationship or a conversation or some type of just having a dialogue or just seeking refuge in your Lord somehow, that's what the supplication does, and that is answered right away. That's how I remember, or I think about it.
So then, you have something to say? Okay. So I'll just read this following paragraph that comes after this introduction, which is at the first paragraph of page 330. Thus, since Almighty God is all-present and all-seeing, he responds to the supplications of his servants. Through his presence and response, he transforms the desolation of loneliness and solitude into familiarity. But he does this not in accordance with man's capricious and importunate demands, but in accordance with the requirements of dominical wisdom. He gives either what is sought or what is better than it, or he gives nothing at all. So it looks like being able to make the supplication itself consciously is the response right in there. Because if I am consciously making the supplication, then in this consciousness of what I am doing is a response. Because I am aware that there is somebody who is watching over me, who is providing me my existence right now. So I am declaring my neediness and seeing that there must exist a provider who can cover my neediness. This very fact that I'm making the supplication includes the response in it. So I guess consciousness is the key, because I find myself to be just repeating, uttering words, thinking that I am supplicating. It looks like a very unconscious version of supplication, personally speaking. So, but apparently, if I am consciously aware of what I am doing, then the response is right in there. Okay. In the next paragraph, he talked about supplication as a form of worship and recognition of man's servitude to God, and its fruits pertain to hereafter. We talked about this last time, what hereafter might mean in here. Then next, he talked about drought is the time for such worship. It's the purpose of worship shouldn't be to bring rain. It should be just to declare the need and leave the taking of measures to the Creator. In there, he was talking about, because as we come to the last paragraph that we discussed last week, as for worship and servitude to God, it should be purely and sincerely for God's sake. Did we talk about what we mean by God's sake in there last week? If we did, we can continue. If not, if anybody has anything to say, what does God's sake mean in here? Because this is a very common word that we keep using. For the sake of God, I do this, that. But what does it mean?
I don't remember discussing.
Okay, so let's start discussion from this paragraph.
As for worship and servitude to God, it should be purely and sincerely for God's sake. Man should only proclaim his impotence and seek refuge with him through supplication. He should not interfere in his dominicality. He should leave the taking of measures to him and rely on his wisdom. He should not accuse his mercy.
Okay. So with this being said, let's start today's discussion with what is for the sake of God. Like worship and servitude being purely and sincerely for the sake of God. What do we understand from this phrase? Any comments? Let's start with from online participants. Anyone wants to make any comment? Go ahead, Asim.
Assalamu alaikum. Yeah. Sorry, I joined late. So you're asking about what does it mean to be purely and sincerely for God's sake? That's the question. So my take on that is, like how the author was explaining what the purpose of worship and supplication is to establish a connection and a relation with your source of existence. So when he says like sincerely and purely for God's sake, it again, think about it. Where else can you go for help? Who else can you ask for? But so if one has this understanding that there is the source of existence for everything, so this requires the awareness and consciousness to what is it that we are asking or seeking, and what is it that we owe all this existence to, then that becomes for God's sake. Basically having that awareness in mind. Otherwise, if let's say if I'm giving something in charity, and I don't have the recognition that this is not something that does not belong to me, but it's something that is given, and I am just exercising what has been given to me in his recognition that he is the provider, and I'm just a means of that giving. So that becomes something in God's sake, as a small example.
Jazakallah khair. Awesome.
Is the rest of the paragraph explains the first statement, or they are separate? They like he makes like separate points with each statement, or you think that like the following sentences kind of opens up what it really means?
Can be. I guess it can be. One aspect of it can be like that, and it makes sense if we take it as such.
When it says God's sake, it feels like so you can make God like you more type of thing, or at least the result. I think that's what's translated from. Like,
He's
so,
happy with you.
Huh?
That he's happy with you.
Yeah, so he becomes more happy with you, or likes you more, or you do something so that he's happier with you. That's like what the terminology sounds to me like, which doesn't make sense to me.
So in the original text, he uses the word li wajhillah, which means for the face of God, actually. But what does that mean?
So the way now I understand, so it sounds like the author is saying that the worship is, and the original word ubudiyya, right, being servitude, servant, is there so that you realize that you're a servant, and so that you can find the present, you can find yourself in the presence of God. So this is the goal of worship, so that you reach to God, so that you see, in a metaphorical sense, you see the face of God. So this is the reason you do worship, you do supplication, to reach to God. As for worship and servitude to God, it should be purely and sincerely for reaching the presence of God. A man should only proclaim his impotence and seek refuge with him. So he's saying that this is the goal. Your goal should be just realize what you are, proclaim your impotence, and try to reach his presence, so that, going back to beginning, so that you get rid of your dissolution of loneliness and solitude. So, and then he continues, he says, otherwise, you do not make supplication so that, you get something. As if, oh, God, give me a car, oh, God, give me money, oh, God, give me a house. Like, there is nothing wrong by asking these. But when you ask for a car, a house, or money, these are just means to reach the presence of God, just for the sake of asking. Otherwise, he says, like, don't care about whether he gives you car or not. Do not interfere with the rest. This is what I understand, like when he says, do not interfere with in his dominicality. Whether you get a car, whether you get money or house, whether they are being created or not, it's not your business. Your business is just asking them, so that you reach his presence.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I have something, but I'm not sure if it's a comment or it's a question. I understand the consciousness aspect of it, that like what is really important to understand your own reality so that you can understand like God and your relationship like with it. But at the same time, those like that understanding or that awareness comes through really like going through like real life events. For example, like being in need of like food or car is the basis of that relationship. So on one hand, it is okay to conclude that like what is really important to have that consciousness that he is the provider. But on the other hand, you truly experience that like in the level of consciousness, it's okay. But like at the same time, in the physical sense, like you also like look for some sort of evidences of that. You want to see that also in the events that you experience. And when it comes to that, like it kind of falls into gray area for me. So like it is not easy to read the events itself like with that like mindset. Like if you can do that, then I guess like that would be the end goal. But on one hand, like we say that like, okay, God is the provider, but on the other hand, like when it comes to like reading the events itself, like then I find myself like not oftentimes, actually like every time I'm acting like I am the agent, true agent that's taking care of the things. So I completely live with that like dual like understanding. So like the question is like, how do you really combine the two?
Combine two?
Yeah, combine this like, or like not combining maybe, but how do you really, what is the word I am looking for?
Live
Like,
for the sake of God.
I'm sorry?
Live for the sake of God.
Yeah, like,
I mean, in this context.
yeah. How did this like marry these two like different, seemingly two different realms together? Like for example, I can see like I'm impotent because like when I like, for example, getting like this cough that for a week that I cannot get rid of. It's just a cough, but like I'm like impotent to get rid of it. So like this is something very like experiential, right? But at the same time, the things that I am like going to, it's not really him. Like I'm just trying all different kind of medicines and like taking all different kind of stuff to aid to get rid of it.
Maybe you should.
Do you see the dilemma? Like I just realized that I never actually asked him to get like take it from me, like away from me.
As we were discussing last week, God becomes irrelevant in most of the real life scenarios.
Like I guess like really in a nutshell, like it is okay to read from the text. Like I'm intellectually, I think I understand what he's talking about, but like as soon as I walk out of here, like this has like no, like there's a lot of implications of it, but like there is like it has no room. I feel like it has no room in my life. Like when it comes to really actually putting that understanding in practice, and I get lost in the events rather than like really connecting everything with him.
Could it be that the author is actually giving a recipe for exactly for this situation? And he's saying that, Osman, this is your reality. You will forget all the time. God will become irrelevant in your life. To remember that, to reach his presence, you should do the supplication, worship. Just in a practical sense. Like, raise your hands and ask. Just practice it. And do it for the sake of God. if it is something simple, something small, just practice worshiping, practice supplication. Oh God, start the engine of my car. Oh God, give me health. Oh God, give me food while you are eating. And do it for the sake of God.
Maybe so. Like
this reminds me of a verse that we had studied in another circle of everything shall perish save us. It seems like the author's using the same word there. Just what I remember from that was extracting from the things that I experience, the objects that I interact with, the qualities that are manifesting, that are showing me the attributes and the qualities of my Creator. So I don't know, I feel like in this context perhaps it could be about recognizing that, I guess, for worship and servitude to God should be purely and sincerely for God's sake. Recognizing the lack of efficacy of anything that I am trying to benefit from, and in recognition of that, presenting my supplication. So I guess the notion of sincerity being tied to the recognition that only His will is being efficiently manifested in any of my dealings. So I don't know, maybe in your supplication, it's hard, I don't want to put myself in your position. But maybe it's the very fact that all those medicines are impotent, right? Lack efficacy. And maybe that recognition will make them actually work, because then you're recognizing that any quality in them that does seem to give about a result is not from their own doing. But maybe that's just going back to always hashing about causes of no effect. So I don't know.
So author will talk about all these different supplications. One of them is what you're mentioning, like invoking the causes or trying causes, gathering them so that it becomes a supplication. But it's just one type of supplication, right? The author talks about the other kinds of supplications, and one of them is asking Him, articulating, with your human language, asking. And so this reminds me, all these verses and narrations talking about, everything in the universe glorifying Him. Everything in universe, and read another sentence, I guess the first sentence of the next paragraph. Glorification and worship, so that rises to divine court from all the universe, is supplication. So from the whole universe, supplication is rising to a divine court, whatever it means, we will study. But there's what is the word? Is it like a coherence? Everything doing it at the same time and in a harmony. There seems to be the harmony in the universe, in everything. When it comes to us, we don't see this harmony. For instance, my needs, when I'm hungry, yes, just being hungry is a supplication. And I'm doing the supplication, just being hungry, yes. And then I try some causes to feed myself, they don't work, or in case of illness, I try medicine, it doesn't work. It's another supplication. But this other kind of supplication that I actively, consciously not as a tongue of disposition or tongue of capacity, whatever the other kind of supplications author list, not that way, but in a conscious way, actively asking my Creator, oh Creator, make me healthy. This part is always, not always, but most of the time is missing. So we break this harmony within us. And we say, okay, my body is doing supplication, my needs are doing supplication, as if that's the whole story. And we are not part of the equation. We are not like this conscious being is not there. Just like your example in Shenandoah National Park. And then, nighttime everywhere is dark, there's no car. Our beloved Yusuf and his beloved wife stops nearby, get out of the car. The entire forest is doing supplication. All these, what is it? In Turkish is August insects.
Grasshopper.
Sorry?
Crickets.
Let's say crickets. It's not crickets, but let's say crickets. Doesn't matter. The entire forest. It's an overwhelming sound, right? And everything doing supplication, you hear it, and you question yourself, like, where you are in this picture. Where are you in this picture? And you are nowhere. They are doing their supplication, and you're just trying to, I don't know, just do your salah as quickly as possible so that, you can continue your way. This is your reality. And it gives you, I'm just, talking on behalf of you. These are my feelings. You feel ashamed because you are not part of this harmony. I guess it's the same way, like when it comes to our universe, like my body, myself, my entire body is doing supplication all the time. All my needs, all my feelings, everything, whatever's about me, doing supplication, except my conscious being.
That is the actual gist of the religion itself.
Yes.
That's where actually like man is truly responsible for. So like if we can really like, speaking for myself, if I can really like understand this text in terms of what supplication means and how I can really put in practice, I would be fulfilling the duty, like in terms of like putting the religion itself in practice, the whole teaching of the religion itself in practice. So like all the basis of that 6 pillars, I think it's really comes down to this thing, like when it comes to living with those essence, it comes down to this.
I have a question. I'm a little confused by your characterization of the forest and your mantra. Like, we've discussed about how everything in the universe can be in a state of worship, right? And what that means. And that makes sense to me. And in the text, it says supplication is a form of worship, but it also seems like supplication is a very specific form of worship that requires some sort of verbal articulation. At
least one type, it says, yes.
What makes us categorize? Is there a difference between saying that things are in supplication and things are in worship? I feel like there should be. And so just kind of putting both into the same category because I feel confusing. I mean,
you think they are 2 different acts? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I think supplication goes under the umbrella of worship, right? And takes a certain form of the essence of what worship is. But I also think that it feels very specific to a conscious will, namely that belongs to human beings. Mm-hmm. And I'm not one to assert that there's no conscious will besides humans, right?
No, I get
everything
it.
else. But it just seemed like the picture that you were presenting shows everything in harmony through the state of supplication, but I'm not sure how I can actually confirm that, you know? It seems more like everything's in a state of worship where, you know, through their tone of disposition and etc., they're presenting the qualities that they're given, but that's not the same state of me articulating my needs and presenting those needs to my creator.
So I should be continue because it should there we will say it.
But before going there, I would just want to underline one thing that Sister Aisha was talking about for the liwajhillah part of it. So as there that's being mentioned, so there are phases of things that looks to me, my worldly life, my own interest, let's say me being healthy because I don't want discomfort. And when I say this, in this 60, 50, whatever years of life, discomfort disturbs me, that's it. In that moment, I don't want to be discomforted. Next moment is a new moment, whatever. I mean, even if I'm comfortable this moment or not comfortable this moment, it's going to disappear in the next moment. So there's such an aspect of existence which looks to the moment and to my personal interests, which just departs momentarily. But there is also an aspect of this existence that looks to its maker. And actually this looks very much to the very first revelation when it says, read in the name of your Lord that created. Because you can read existence in the name of other things as well. So when sickness comes to me, generally I tend to read it in the name of my own interest or in the name of chances, things as such. But the gist of belief is we are now studying at the 5th point now, because this isn't like a consequence of belief. So it requires reading things for the in the name of its maker, or in this context right now, liwajhillah, their face that looks to its maker. So this practically putting it, I guess maybe for eating food, it should also be there, but since I'm very far away from that much of it, but let's say for something as big as a sickness or some sort of a conflict between you and your best friend, whatever. So I'm definitely disturbed by this. Why does this happen? What am I supposed to take out of that? So if I read it personally, or if I say, well, this is his problem, he did this, so I did that, then I cannot get out of this cycle. I just stay there forever. It doesn't help me anyways. But if I read this thing in the face that it looks to its maker, which means I see my neediness. I didn't want this relationship to be broken. What am I seeing in this sort of existence? I guess this should be the purpose of my life. And generally, as Osman was saying, this is actually coming to under the umbrella of even living with qadar. So this is where again the trying to read the existence, trying to get a message out of it. And supplication very well fits under here, saying that read the face of things that looks to its maker. Do not look at things or get lost in their face that looks to the temporary moment. I guess this is what belief, or at least my target in living, should be. It definitely requires a will, because first moment when sickness comes, I am disturbed, and this is where I am attacking. I want to get rid of this disturbance. Or if somebody just insults me, immediately I want to protect myself. So these are the very, if you like, reflexive reactions that I get used to. But instead I should say, hold on, what's going on in here? Is my belief, which now I am at 5th point, how does my belief come into picture in here? It requires some training. And at some point of his writings, Mursi talks about it, saying that when they put him into exile and somebody insulted him right at the spot there, he was quite offended for 1 hour. He says, I was very upset, very angry, and I was just having this back and forth conversation in my mind with this guy. So then he said, wait a second, the Creator gave existence to this. What was the point of that? Then this is where you start looking at the facet of the existence that it looks to the Creator now. then he says all my problems disappeared, I was quite content, whatever. So I guess this being in this state is living liwajhillah, like looking at things on their facet that looks to their maker. And I should be targeting to live in this moment. Again and again, I'm going to get lost in the moment, but I should say, okay, now turn back to liwajhillah, its facet, as Sister Ashana was saying, thus, kullu shayin halikun illa wajhah, everything perishes save his countenance, but the way that Nushi says, translates it is, everything perishes except its face that looks to its maker. This facet doesn't perish. So just to underline this liwajhillah part of it.
So the question is, he's talking about this, like what you describe, in the context of asking things. Like a child asking medicine from doctor, or asking grain in the drought time. Not asking grain, he says, it's not for asking grain. But anyway, what I'm trying to say, he's not talking about a general state of human in which he or she reads the universe. But he talks about a state of human in which he or she needs. He's conscious about their needs, his needs. So I guess not separating, but explaining this state with reading universe, to me, it sounds as if something is missing. Because when you say reading is universe, you can read the universe in other mental states as well. Like when you are rich, when you have everything you want, you can read it in the name of God. But when you are in such a state in which you are aware of your neediness, and using this state for the face which looks at him, I guess it should be described with some other verse other than reading. I don't know what it is exactly, because the all metaphors come to my mind, it's only applicable to humans, like this is your mother hugging you, for instance. This is what I understand in this context. Like when he says, for the sake of God, or liwajhillah, this is what comes to my mind, my mother hugging me. And through my neediness, I experience her hug, which is what I care at the end.
Why do you think that it should be a different action, or different, should be described with a different word? Because whether it is a need, whether it's a happiness, they're all like the verses in the creation, right?
Yes, different verses.
Different verses. You will get different meanings out of it, or maybe not. Maybe they will point out the same thing. But at the end, like, you are there to interpret the events, whether it's like from like either the belief perspective or from the perspective of the things themselves. So like in either case, like you will be interpreting the event, and like you will be responding accordingly.
It's always there. That is true. What you are just saying, or what he was describing, is always there. You have to read events, you have to describe them, you have to understand them in the name of God. But what I'm saying is, if you just say this, which is applicable for every event, which is applicable to every state of yours, then you lose the differences between experiences that you have.
So you are saying this is like something more personal, that has something to do with your own like self, more than the others?
Both personal, and it's all about how the Creator responding you with your needs, to sustain your needs. His response, and he's telling you, don't worry, you are not alone. I'm taking care of you. This response, I guess, that's like core of this text. That's what I'm saying. And when he says, purely, sincerely for God's sake, at least to me, this is at the core. Like he's telling me that Birkan, I'm here for you. And I'm reaching this presence. I'm realizing that he is with me. And I'm doing supplication to reach his presence. This is what I understand from for the sake of God.
So then the emphasis is at the need part of it. This is what I'm understanding.
At need and how it is sustained, let's say, mercifully.
Because I guess in theory, every moment of me is definitely need. Everything also is in need. But I've not sensed this. For example, let's say on a Saturday morning, no job to be done, breakfast is done, I am in a nice state, and now I am sitting in front of a book and trying to understand existence. So in such a state, I am reading existence still, but I am perfectly comfortable. I'm not worried about anything. As an extra hobby, if you like, I mean, definitely there's a desire in me to learn about existence, but as if something going some extra miles, I am enjoying the reading of existence. But on a Thursday night, when there's a due date of something for Friday morning, where I am very deeply feeling my neediness, still there's a reading opportunity. So the emphasis in reading in here, as what I'm understanding from your saying, is still I am needy. In the first case, on Saturday morning, I was also needy, but the flavor of it is different in my tongue. So on Thursday night, it is very deeply now I am sensing my neediness. It's not artificial. And in such a state, what am I supposed to read? So I definitely want this paper or grant to be submitted by tomorrow morning, and this is my reflexive request. But I guess in this context, it should be, what am I now supposed to understand from this scene? Is it simply get something pushed out, or this scene is being created for me so that I realize my neediness, his providence, and just enjoying this aspect of it. Still, it's a reading, but I guess the emphasis or the main or stronger flavor in there is neediness, or and plus need being provided.
There are, like, of course, like multi dimensions, like all the experiences, and through those like experiences, one part is like you're understanding your need, and as a result of it, also getting to know him from a different perspective with a different like name. So in this specific context, like I guess you know him as the provider or sustainer. So like those names are actually like it would be much all obvious for me in this context, because I am aware of my own like impotent and neediness, as opposed to, let's say, like looking at a beautiful flower on a Saturday morning when having the Turkish tea, that you would probably like experience the, like, let's say, the name of Jamil like manifesting on the flower. So it is still reading as just like basically saying the same thing, but reaching to a different name or getting to know him from a different different angle.
Yeah. And what Yusuf said is also, like, he said it quickly, but it's really important, I guess, which is in every state you actually are in need. And I guess this is what we should be reaching. Like, this should be our goal. With everything, when even you think you are perfectly happy, content with your tea, your flower, your wife, whatever, even within this experience, you should be reaching his presence in a similar way, realizing your needs and realizing how these needs are provided by him. Because to me, at least, this is so personal, this is the only thing I care. Somebody is there for me and taking care of me, crossing my hairs, You know, just like a child. Just like you taking care of Zainab. This is the state I want to be. Just like Zainab. My Creator will take care of me. And if in any event I can reach His presence in such a way, then I'm in the heaven. Otherwise, you know, just as a metaphor, instead of Zainab, Yusuf, he's studying at the university, he's learning all this stuff about his maker, about the universe, about himself. I don't want to be in this state. This is not the state I want to be. This is the state, Zainab, I want to be. So, I guess for that reason, neediness and supplication is so important for our journey.
You're asking for too much.
Sorry?
You're asking for too much.
This is what happens at the due dates of grant applications. You just said, I don't want any more of this.
But we also, you know, like I have the need on the other side to want to be self-sufficient, right?
I don't know. Like,
Sure,
self-sufficient?
maybe that comes from this need to not be sufficient on anything except the one who can fulfill my needs, sure. But at the same time, like, as a human being, sure, I want to be like an infant in that I'm taken care of, but at the same time, I don't want to be like an infant in that I want to be able to do things, to have power.
So that's why
that's
exactly,
also a need.
that's exactly what I'm saying. This is not true, at least for me. Because whenever I try to do something,
But I want power, or being the ability, I don't want to say power, but the ability to do something that is, that doesn't make me feel impoverished. Because you wanting to be like Zainab is because you feel that you can't do anything, right? Just like, not just.
Somebody makes a comment, says that she wants to be a dictator.
I've been told I have tendencies, but what I'm saying is the need to want to be like a baby is because we feel, or I feel, my own incompetency, my own lack of success, my own neediness. But under that, it comes the desire to actually not want to be needy in a way that makes me feel complete or sustained. Do you understand what I'm like? The need for that state of being satisfied with your needs is because we can't satisfy our own needs. But if you, instead of that, you ask for a need, you ask for a state of being where you're not like that to begin with. It's a little.
But like
I don't
at
think
central, it's still like there is still a need.
Yeah,
like,
there is.
Different sort of need, though. But like the point is, still you are needy of like something from him.
Right, but I don't need to necessarily
Even though
direct that
it may seem to be
neediness.
contradictory to like what like he's asking for, like, but like you have.
I understand what he's asking for, and I can empathize with it. But I'm saying that that state of neediness actually comes from a more fundamental need, maybe. I don't know.
Just something very quick. This like take this as a joke, but at the same time I'm really serious about it. Like, sometimes I feel like when I hear like two different people like praying to God for something that's completely contradictory to each other, I feel like they are praying to the same God. Like, he's asking for something, she's asking for something else, and it's a contradictory. And I was like, to me, that's a proof of like God's absoluteness, because only absolute can provide to people, all people, whatever they are asking for, especially when like all the things that they are asking for actually goes against each other.
Or maybe they don't go against each other, just on the surface level they appear to.
Some comments, and then Suhail is going to talk, I guess. So Muhammad Said says, why a person should read or seek the aspect of the things that looks to its source.
Why?
Why? Yeah. Nice question. He said it should be as such, but we didn't say why it should be as such.
What? Can you read the question again?
Why a person should read or seek the aspect of the things that looks to its source, that looks to its maker.
You probably Suhail would answer that.
Okay, so before Suhail, then there is a comment from sisters H. Beyza plus Banu of Nur. State of being needy versus the need for not feeling needed to things. They cannot meet my needs.
Can they clarify?
Can they clarify? We're asking for clarification from them. But first, Suhail, please go ahead, and then inshallah sisters H. Beyza and Banu of Nur can clarify.
Assalamu alaikum. So I maybe this will answer Muhammad Sayyid's question, but kind of. I don't know if you guys would join a little late and mention this when he says purely and sincerely for God's sake. I guess this point is about even if your prayer is not realized, it's answered. And I think to me, really, that's the most important aspect. But because really, not to say that you don't want rain in a drought, or you don't want, let's say, some affliction to be lifted, some illness or injustice to be lifted. But if you remove yourself from the situation, like what is fundamentally the point if they're lifted or not? Because in the end, I think, everyone departs this world anyway. So whether you live through a drought or don't, the end is all the same. So to Muhammad Said's point, if you don't look to something's aspect that looks to the source, honestly, what is really anyone doing? To me, that's sort of, I don't know what kind of life, or even if one can call that living, because you're just going through the motions. I want rain and it rains today, and I'm satisfied, and I move on to the next day of my life. It doesn't do anything for you eternally. And if you, I mean, it sounds a bit nihilistic, but what does it matter if it rains or doesn't rain? In the end is the same anyway. And to Aisha Noor's point, I in that regard, why would anyone want anything to be placed on their shoulders? There's too much to think about, too much stress, too much anxiety. Truthfully, I feel like, to me, life would be easier if you didn't have to worry about those things. You relied on someone or something else to do it for you, because then it would be taken care of. And I don't see anyone better than one who gave those things existence in the first place and can give them existence. That's what I think Norsi is saying. He should not interfere in his dominicality. In other words, how things manifest in his dominion, and therefore his wisdom. He should not accuse his mercy. One can say the most merciful aspect of this is that you are able to seek his mercy. Because if you weren't able to seek his mercy, then you wouldn't know him to be most merciful or most wise. So that's kind of what I took away. I'm not sure if that answers Muhammad Said's point. Now, last thing I'll say is, practically speaking, this is very difficult to do, because myself, I don't know if it's you. I really do it purely and sincerely for God's sake. It's almost transactional. Like, hey, I need this. You can do it, so please give it to me because I need it. And if you don't give it to me, maybe I'll be a bit disappointed, and I won't be gracious that I'm even able to ask or seek his intercession. So that's what I took away.
I just want to add that I think it's very human to enjoy and want the feeling of accomplishment, even if I also recognize that essentially I'm not the one accomplishing it. It's a human feeling. You know, like let's say I'm training for a marathon. I can have all the understandings in the world that I'm not the one running, and you know I don't have the power to do any of these. I'm just exercising my willpower. But even that exercising a willpower is in a way that aligns with your humanness, I guess. I don't know. I just feel like there's that I've been created in a way where if I orient my will in a certain way and a product or a result comes about that is in alignment with how the order of the universe and order of creation works, then I'm happy with that. That's a sense of feeling of accomplishment that my creator gives to me, even if I also recognize that I'm not the owner of that accomplishment. And I think, you know, even just on the you know, let alone like physical things, the notion of being gifted with comprehension or increased knowledge of something, the process of learning something, right? I can also recognize that understanding itself is a manifestation of mercy, but I can also be grateful that I'm able to use my will in a way where it brings about such results. I don't know. I feel like it's helpful to further complicate the picture of, well, you know, I just want to submit myself fully and submit fully my needs to my creator, not worry about anything, because alongside the feelings of relief and comfort that gives, there's also, I feel like the human being is just a little bit more complicated in terms of how I find myself created.
I think there is a joy in like discovering the potentialities that you're given.
Sure.
And like human being itself is very complicated. Like to me, like there are so many different like aspects of like human being or dimensions, like understanding yourself and also your position in relation to an absolute power and using your free will and walking in the straight path. Like it is not a really easy thing to do, but because, or for example, in this specific subject, like there is one aspect that like the neediness of it, that like you cannot really bring anything into existence in terms of your needs. But on the other hand, you are experiencing something about yourself that you have some sort of potentiality that wants to manifest. So making sense of that and being in a balanced point and walking on the straight path, I think that's what actually like walking on this the bridge of Sirat is. Maybe that's why it is a lifetime like learning process.
That was much better put than mine.
So like how do you really marry like what you said versus what we have been discussing? Because it is true that like we all have that this aspect that when we have some sort of potentiality that is like that comes out, we enjoy that, we have like joy out of that. So that's another aspect. So how do you really put all these things together, like with like some sort of perspective that actually will be in line with the fact that like at the end, like we are not sustaining our own like life.
Right, they're not mutually exclusive.
Man, since you know, I will refer to another part. Nicholas. So again, the question is whether you should enjoy something or you shouldn't enjoy something. The question is not that. The question is not whether there's an accomplishment, you like it or you don't like it, you should like it or you shouldn't like it. Yes, we enjoy accomplishment, but I guess the question is, what do we like? When I say I enjoy accomplishment, what I really mean. So let's assume I accomplished something and I'm enjoying this because, quote unquote, at least this is my claim, I'm saying that my creator, he created this accomplishment so that I enjoy. I observe it, I experience it. So now, just imagine, not yourself, but the person who in your mind always you compare yourself, and there's always such a person. You compare yourself, you're trying to find his or her mistakes because you think you are better than her or him in some aspects, and people always, talking about him or her, whatever. And now she or he's accomplishing something. Do you enjoy? Most of the time, no. Most of the time.
I can if I think it's great.
Sure, you can. Like when it comes to me, I find myself not enjoying much. It is an accomplishment. She just did a great thing in front of me, but I don't enjoy it. So, to me, like there's something about me, let's say broken. And I know there's something broken, not because, from a moral perspective or something, because in such a state, when I'm such a person who can enjoy his accomplishment but cannot enjoy Yusuf's accomplishments, I find myself in trouble in my own life. So I'm not somehow content with my life. And I think this choice of mine, that enjoying my accomplishments but not his, something has with it. Like, which reminded me the 18th word, where we studied the verse, think not that those who exalt in what they have thus contrive. I guess, like in Arabic it says, don't think those who have enjoyment, farah, have enjoyment in what they bring forth. Is it the right way? Okay. So what they brought, what they accomplished. Don't think those people who have this peace, relief in what they accomplish, and then it continues, it describes what is wrong with it, and who love to be praised for what they have not done. And when he says have not done, I guess it's using the root is fa'il, yaf'alun or something. The verb is there. So as if it's saying, and it continues, don't think such people, think not that they will escape suffering. For grievous suffering does await them. And this is what I experience. Every time I enjoy my accomplishment, but not Nibra's accomplishment, I found myself in suffering next moment, or sometimes in the moment itself. And the verse, to me at least, explains in such a way that it says, yes, there is an accomplishment that you see. Sometimes in you, sometimes in someone else, but the fa'il, doer, of this accomplishment is not you. So, yes, saying it, yeah, I know it's, him creating it, it's nothing. As long as you find yourself not enjoying something else the same source is created, his accomplishment, that means, there's something, again, maybe you or myself making a jump by saying, yes, I know that it's him creating. Going back to text, I guess, as long as we do not realize, I do not realize, the real enjoyment I have is experiencing his doing something. Not saying it, but experiencing it. That it's not me, but he is doing something. This is the real enjoyment. And how you experience this? In the moment of needs. Because when you are needy, when you are asking him, you already, release all your claims, everything, abandon them. And say that, okay, it's you. And this understanding that it's you, not me, and experiencing it in the moment by supplication, I guess this is the real enjoyment, real peace, real satisfaction. And again, this is how it works with me. When I talk about it, it doesn't work. But when I'm in misery, and when I'm really asking it, like consciously, then I experience it, and then I have the pleasure. And at least from my experience, this is the real pleasure. Like a few moments in my life that I experienced, in every time I had something bad in my life, I felt miserable. These moments were the only true pleasures that I had. Accomplishment, yes, I have pleasure. Having some money, I have pleasure. Meeting with the woman that you want to marry, it's a pleasure. But when you realize that she doesn't act as you wish, that's the real pleasure.
That is the real suffering.
No, seriously, like that's the real pleasure. When you take it for the sake of God. Like the pleasure is overwhelming. Like like as if you pray for the next misery in your life.
Well, why is misery such a prerequisite of those feelings of genuine?
Unmarried people in the gathering, so don't paint the picture so miserable.
No, when I say misery, it's like...
No, because you're right that in those moments, right, when then you go into that state of realization or whatever, you can experience that sense of relief and pleasure, but it seems like that sort of misery then becomes a sort of prerequisite.
So I guess it becomes a prerequisite because of the language we use. Like when I say this, when I explain this, I'm still living in this secular world. Like it is misery for someone like me, but it's not a misery for a believer.
It's a misery if you cannot reach for the Libechilwa, is that the word? And Aisha has a look on her face saying that like after discussion you will see what misery is.
Yes. Suhail's hand was up, now it is down. If your ideas and enthusiasm didn't escape, Suhail, you can listen.
I just wanted to ask when Aisha Nur was saying about accomplishment, people feeling happy that they accomplished something. Now, I can understand that, but I also think that is a dangerous road for the ego. And because, if one doesn't like accomplish something, that's why I almost feel like sometimes worship and servitude may be transactional, in that I accomplish something so I can forget about who really is operating, whose will is really in effect. And then if something happens that I don't like, or I didn't get the result I wanted, then I turn towards him. It's to me, as Nursi says, it should be purely and sincerely for God's sake. So, like if I accomplish something, even like the word accomplishment, I feel like needs to be unpacked. Accomplishment according to whose metrics? Because to me, the only accomplishment is when you, as Muhammad said, like, do you really need to look towards things that look to him? So even when something you did, do you see it as looking towards him? To me, that's hamd and shukr. And but in like modern secular society, the emphasis on what you accomplish, not on did you see whose will, did you see the manifestation of his will, of his dominicality, of his wisdom or his mercy. So to me, I don't personally put much stock in accomplishment, because, you know, at the end of the day, that's not, to me, the objective. So I understand people get some warm feeling out of it, but just my experience, it can possibly lead you to forget, or for the ego to take ownership then.
Can we make like a distinction though? Like, I understand what like you both, like Birkan and Suhail, what you guys are saying, but at the same time, it is who we are. Like, we also have that aspect that like we are giving so much potentialities, and when they manifest like in a different shape and form, we get pleasure out of it. So like we cannot really deny that aspect of human being as well. But like when it comes to whether like, again, like you attribute that to yourself or to your ego as like your own doing, versus like it's like God's like bounty that you are given, that's a different story. That again goes back to how you read, how you interpret the experience. That's a different story. But like at the same time, I don't think we should really kind of close our eyes to the fact that human being has that aspect as well, and I think we should be aware of that, and we should appreciate that too, because that's part of us.
But for example, human also can enjoy crushing insects. Like nowadays, I guess Joker is in the theaters. People are going to go and enjoy watching the movie Joker, like from the Batman Joker. So there's an aspect in human to enjoy such stuff. I mean, definitely there are such aspects in there, but that's in human. But how am I going to utilize it? Maybe this should.
But like, can I clarify something? When I say enjoyment, for example, let's say like I'm an artist. Actually, there are artists in this room, so yes, they can relate to it. So like, if that like potentiality is like manifested in a shape of like in a form of an art, you get some pleasure out of it, don't you? Yeah. Like that's what I mean, like by like.
Yeah. So what I was understanding from what Suhail and Birkan was saying is, so is there a way that I can appreciate the same feeling, but it's not going to be as taking the credit to myself? Still, I'm going to enjoy it.
That's the thing. Like there, like first of all, let's like. Are we on the same page that like we also have that kind of like side of us?
Yeah.
And then like the next step comes, like how do you really interpret that? Like do you really like claim an ownership over that quality, or you are aware of like of the fact that like actually you are still needy to be given that quality as well?
And from your nefs perspective, it will always be a misery when you do not claim ownership. So you enjoy the art, you can enjoy the art, but your soul will try to attribute the authorship to himself. And when you try to cut this, it will always a misery. You will experience the misery in your life. So this is why, as Ashanur was saying, like why misery has to be there. Because your soul, or you, whatever, cannot have the ownership. And you will have this not having the ownership as a misery. You will experience it as a misery. And this misery will give you the enjoyment. Because now you are free to enjoy the art itself.
Suhail, go ahead, please.
I do agree with Osman here in that I can't, this kind of goes back to our retreat discussion. I can't deny what I feel, pleasure, misery, etc. The question is, how do I interpret it? That's my choice. I think with the word accomplishment, to me, at least that's just me, but I get like sensitive like with words like that, accomplishment or success, or there's like some sort of implicit acknowledgement of the I, the self, the ego. Like, oh, he did this, or he did that, or he accomplished this. Because accomplishment is like, it can be interpreted in different ways, but it's the idea that the ascribing of the doing, the fa'il, as Birkan was saying, is to the self. It's saying there's pleasure, but that pleasure is ascribed to the self. The doing or the cause of the pleasure is to the self. And to me, that's a sort of dangerous path to take. I don't doubt that somebody who paints something or builds something doesn't have pleasure in the building or the painting. But I guess the question is, does one see where that pleasure is coming from when painting or when building, or the perfection of art or the perfection of construction? Because that's what people are after, the perfection, I guess, of beauty, let's say. However that manifests, whether it's in art or construction or anything for that matter. But the question is, does one see where the desire for that perfection and the pleasure one has in that perfection of beauty comes from? Just, accomplishment seems like a very loaded term. So when like Aisha Nur is like craving for political power, that to me is like, it kind of, that's kind of the mentality I feel like is in society today, is that I need to do this so I demonstrate who I am, or it kind of signals to me that I did something. I'm not saying that's what Aisha was implying, but that's kind of how I take that sort of terminology.
And H. Beza plus Banu of Nur had made several comments. Would you like to expound on your comments rather than me reading them, if you are available?
Assalamu alaikum. The comments were from me, and I'm just saying that because I want to save Nur Banu of any lack of sense any of them might make. And also the Banu of Nur is also from me too, just in case. Okay, so the first comment I made was the state of being needy versus the need for not feeling needy, to things that cannot meet my needs. So in this, I was thinking about how so I find myself in a state of neediness and impotence, but at the same time I feel the need not to feel needy. And I think the need not to feel needy, as Aisha was mentioning earlier on, like stems from not wanting to feel needy to things that cannot actually meet my needs. So, I don't want to, for example, maybe a typical example, but like, if my boss is treating me poorly, for example, or in an unjust manner, then I don't want to feel like I have no choice. I don't want to feel needy to him for example, a source of income, for example. So that feeling of not wanting to feel needy I think in part stems from the human need to have a reliable source. So I just wanted to make that distinction there. And then another comment, I'm just going to read the last one. So accomplish, this is along the lines of what Aishana and Sohail were saying, but I think a different spin on it, not exactly what they were saying. So I was trying to understand accomplishment as submitting oneself, and what is submitting oneself? So as in following the order of the universe accompanied with the consciousness of one's reality, of createdness and acknowledgement of one's source, meaning that I'm not sure if this is what Aishana was getting at, but for example, in using my free will in a particular way, and this particular way being like in the way that it was meant to be used. So for example, cultivating a source of consciousness or mindfulness about, or questioning my own reality, also just the act of learning, not for learning's sake, but even questioning the sake of why is it that it is in my nature to learn, but also this like constant endeavor of constantly trying to improve oneself, right? So like, you know, if you want to do something, or if you want to achieve something, and I put these in quotation marks, like there is an order in the universe in which I have to follow. If I want apples from an apple tree, I have to make sure that I follow the order in the universe to kind of ask for that result. So I was taking what Aishana said to be like, in following the order of the universe, there's like a sense of accomplishment, or like a good job, like a pat on the back, whether or not I get the result that I want. But like, I know with myself, if I spend my time productively, or if I at least strive to do so, whether or not I get done whatever it is that I want to get done, I feel a lot better than I would have if I did not even try. So even in the intention or in the act itself, there's a sort of like gold star that I get, that one gets in doing so. So, and I do agree with the implications that Sohail brought up about like achievements or accomplishments kind of having this implicit or like low-key implications about like, you know, the I doing something. But I guess in particular in this context, I was thinking about accomplishments as, you know, following the order of the universe, as in the way that I am created, but also with the consciousness of my own createdness. So with the reality or awareness of my own impotence in that situation. So I train for a marathon, but I'm aware at the same time that my only real, if you even call it real, my only the only effect I can have on that situation is just choosing to do something as opposed to the end result.
Yes, Suhail, go ahead.
To go off what Aisha Nur said, you know, practically speaking, I know some of you guys are in like medicine, like Birkan, or Yusuf's in science, or Osman's engineering, or anybody like who's in academia, or even Osman, for you could talk about. I mean, really anybody. It's a human sort of plague, epidemic. I maybe somebody can show me an example. I have never seen once in my life where, let's say, a scientist or a physician signed or began any paper or a forward of any paper or new idea or new journal article thanking God. Now, never in my life have I ever seen that. Not once. They thank their kids, they thank their wife, they thank their mentors. They thank. They thank the institutions. But I've never seen anybody thank God. On the flip side, when something doesn't go the way they want it, some experiment, they weren't able to get something published, something they wanted to do didn't work out for their own career achievement. That's to me the emphasis. I've never seen anybody, going to the court of pleas or to his court, asking him, for relief. Like, so, in theory, I agree with Osman that the choice isn't how you interpret it, but by and large, I don't, practically speaking, in society and even myself, I don't really see that happen. I see the choice being made to ascribe to the will, and the thing is, it's almost as if society, you can't escape it. Like, for example, if I wanted to say, hey, I'm going to write this article, but at the beginning of the article, this journal or publication, I want to thank the Lord of the Cosmos for showing me how he operates his creation, how he gives things existence, and letting me sort of explain that to people. I would be laughed out of the room. So I'm just saying that's, I kind of feel, I think maybe I'm more intolerant of, as I get older, with secular thought, but it's so rampant, it's unavoidable, honestly.
Yeah.
Jazakallah khair.
Yeah, answer.
I think the discussion has ripened enough for Abdurrahman to now read the rest of the text.
We have time for reading.
Yes, 15 minutes.
I think Yusuf reads very well.
Let's hear your voice
How much?
until the end of the book. One page.
And of the book.
Would you like to be?
If you want to read something.
Indeed, what is in reality established by the Quran's clear verses is that just as all beings offer their own particular glorification and worship, so what rises to the divine court from all the universe is supplication. This is either through the tongue of innate ability, like the supplication of plants and animals, though they seek forms from the absolute bestower and to display and manifest his names. This is either through the tongue of innate ability, like the supplication of plants and animals, though they seek forms from the absolute bestower and to display and manifest his names.
Yes, through it they seek for.
Okay. Thank you. Or it is through the tongue of innate need. These are the supplications for all their essential needs, beyond their power to obtain, offered by animate beings. Through this tongue, the animate beings seek certain things from the absolutely generous one for the continuance of their lives, like a sort of sustenance. Or it is supplication through the tongue of exigency, through which all beings with spirits who find themselves in some plight or predicament make supplication and seek urgent refuge with an unknown protector. Indeed, they turn to the all-compassionate sustainer. If there is nothing to prevent it, these three sorts of supplication are always accepted. The fourth sort of supplication is the most well-known. It is our supplication. This too is of two sorts. One is active and by disposition, and the other verbal and with the heart. For example, having recourse to causes is an active prayer. To gather together causes is not in order to create the effect, but through the tongue of disposition to take up an acceptable position in order to seek the effect from Almighty God. To plow a field is to knock at the door of the treasury of mercy. Since this sort of active supplication is directed towards the absolutely generous one's name and title, it is accepted in the great majority of cases. The second sort is to offer supplication with the tongue and the heart. It is to seek certain wishes which the hand cannot reach. The most important aspect, the most beautiful aim, the sweetest fruit of this is this. The one who offers the supplications knows that there is someone who hears the wishes of his heart, whose hand can reach all things, who can bring about each of his desires, who takes pity on his impotence and answers his poverty. O impotent, needy man, do not neglect a means like supplication, which is the key to the treasury of mercy and to an inexhaustible strength. Cling to it. Rise to the highest peaks of humanity. Include in your supplications those of all the universe like a king. Say, from you alone do we seek help. Like a servant and deputy representing all the universe, be on the most excellent pattern of creation.
Jazakallah khair. No. We have 10 minutes. Go ahead.
Going back to almost beginning when we were talking about supplication, I was giving this example of harmony, and you were asking about how you. So the way I understand, like he's talking about a specific form of worship, as with your words. So here he's specifically talking about dua, supplication, and seeing the entire universe, whatever happens there, as a form of supplication. So when I see plants blooming, I see it as a supplication. There is an ability in them which manifests. So through, as he says, through the tongue of ability, the plant as if asking for beauty, for this beauty to manifest, and it is answered, and we see beautiful flower. And another kind, he says, tongue of disposition or neediness. What is the second one? Oh yes, or its tongue of innate need. Again, when I look at a tree, for instance, growing, I see that the water comes, the sunlight comes, and so on. Yes, from a generic perspective, I can read it in the name of God and say that, God is creating everything. This is true. But also I can see it as a form of supplication. Tree is making supplication, asking, I need water, I need sunlight, and it is sustained. And I guess, again, going back to our discussion when we say this specific flavor, so yes, I can read it as the creation of the creator. I can also read it as supplication and sustenance. And when I read it as supplication and sustenance, there's a different flavor that I enjoy. And to me, I enjoy even more. But this is, again, personal. And then he talks about other kind of supplication. Supplication through the tongue of exigency. It's weakness, is it?
Being on a very tough condition, I guess.
Yes, yes. When you are in very, very tough condition, tough not in the sense of, let's say, money, but as your real problems as a human. So being in such a tough condition, or maybe being hungry, let's say, just being in this condition is a kind of supplication. And he says, all these kind of supplications are answered all the time. And even he says accepted, I guess. I always accept it, not even answered, but accepted.
I have a good example for the last one. I worked for a guy who was Mexican, and
You worked for him?
I worked for him, yeah, he was my manager. And we were talking about believing in God, religion, and all that, like at work. And he said he believes in God, and I asked him, like, what's your reasoning that, like, actually he exists? He said he crossed the borders when he was really young on foot. And on the US side, he didn't know where to go. Like he was looking for and he got no money and he didn't know anybody. So he saw a church. So he went to church and he prayed. And he prayed for some sort of guidance about, and food and which direction to go to. And as soon as he walks out of the church, a truck stops by and saw the Mexican guy and said that, hey, you need a job, I have work for you. And I guess since he's Mexican, it's very obvious that he must be a laborer. I guess that was the mindset of the guy who stops with the pickup truck. And he says yes, he needs a job, and he picks him up, and that's how he starts his life here. So he said that is the reason why I believe in God, because he answered my question right away, in that instant. So I think to me it's always a very good example of this last one. Once you really truly understand your neediness, the answer is right away there.
So all these different kind of supplications, asking and being provided, it's there for us as well. That's the reason I was saying, with my body, all my parts of my body are in constant supplication. They asking things. My heart asks for blood, it goes. My cells ask for the oxygen, and it goes there. Constant supplication. And then he talks about the fourth kind of supplication, which is the human supplication himself. It's our supplication. Again, two sorts. One, going to the court of causes, or everything them in an acceptable way. But the second one is articulation. And I was saying that the second one, the last kind of supplication, most of the times is what is missing. The others, you cannot even, deny them, because you won't be able to send oxygen to your cell. You know that. But asking consciously by articulating your needs, this is the part is most of the time missing, and most of the time breaking the harmony. That's what I was saying.
Now that the author is putting this at the end of his fifth point, and he started with human belief, and then now he concludes with supplication. Is it going to be too much if I say that how do I live with belief, or how do I put my belief into practice? How do I benefit from belief? How does God become relevant to me? All the things that we have been speaking so far. So can we say that this conscious way of me making the supplication in order to join the glorification of the rest of the universe? This is how I can put my belief, my conviction into action so that I benefit from it, so that it's not going to be just some sort of a intellectual activity, but it will be something that I will enjoy, that I will benefit from. So while saying this, I'll just underline one sentence which was discussed, but just to, as if this is the crux of all these paragraphs. Indeed, what is in reality established by the Quran's clear verses is that just as all beings offer their own particular glorification and worship, the part that I would like to underline is, so what rises to the divine court from all the universe is a supplication. There should have been either a, or there should have been actually a better translation would be, is one supplication. So what rises to the divine court from all the universe is one supplication.
That doesn't make sense. What do you mean one supplication?
I guess it is the, as Bikram was saying, in terms of harmony of it. You see that it's a in the big picture, you see that as if, let's say, you see the people praying in Kaaba, you say that there is this one salat is being prayed, although there are, let's say, 10 million people are doing it, but seeing it, the harmony in there, it being a congregation, everybody is pointing to one, because the universe is pointing to oneness. So I guess in this sense, there's some sort of a detail there.
Can I ask a question? It's related to Ayşenur's initial comment, worship versus this application, the difference. Do you think like it is actually, they are like two sides of a medal, like, and the worship like looks to the looks to God because you are glorifying Him when you talk about worship, and on the other side, like supplication looks to the human being himself, because you can only really truly glorify God if you know who you are and you're like understand who you are. So in that sense, like in order to be able to glorify Him, first you really need to know yourself, and when you know yourself and you understand your neediness, then like you need to go back to Him, like with your supplication to like ask for things, like whatever it might be. So in that sense, they are almost like the same thing, but also like they are kind of two different aspects of.
Through my supplication, I glorify Him, or through my neediness.
Yeah, like on one aspect, like that looks to Him, that's like glorification of God. Like on the aspect that looks to Him, being understanding your neediness, and so it seems like it's the same thing, but like there are different aspects of it that points to like two different directions.
This being said, I will just reread the last paragraph. If anybody wants to make any comments regarding the supplication, since the parts have been discussed, but we can go into detail. If not, I will conclude with the last paragraph, or anyways, for today I will conclude with the last paragraph. If anybody wants, next week we can discuss details of these applications if needed. If not, we can continue with the next one. O important needy man, do not neglect a means like supplication, which is the key to the treasury of mercy and to an inexhaustible strength. Do not neglect a means like supplication, which is the key to the treasury of mercy and to an inexhaustible strength. Cling to it. Rise to the highest peaks of humanity. Include in your supplication those of all the universe like a king. Say, from you alone do we seek help, like a servant and deputy representing all the universe. Be on the most excellent pattern of creation. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواهم من الحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة.